Okay, all right. So starting off with the topic of classification of living organisms, right? Now, when we talk about classification, we need to first discuss why would I want to classify anything? What is classification? Classification is grouping things, right? I take objects, or I take living organisms that are similar to each other, and I put them in one particular group, right? So I am making a class. I am putting the animals together in one class. I am classifying them. I am doing classification. Now, why is classification something we should do, right? What is the advantage of classification? So when we talk about what are the possible reasons for classifying, first, what is a classification? Classification is the process by which organisms are grouped together based on similar characteristics and abilities. So those organisms that have similar characteristics, similar features, similar abilities, we can group them together, we can put them together in one particular class. Now, when we talk about our topic of classification, you are going to see, or you are going to okay, you are going to basically go ahead and see that the reason we need to actually classify animals is because it allows us to study, and it allows us to better understand these particular organisms, right? We can better understand them. We can better study them if we manage to classify them. We can talk about your classification. So it allows us to actually see that how the process of evolution happened, right? By doing the process of classification, by turning them into classes, I can actually see how the process of evolution happened. Which organism evolved to give us the other organism, right? So we do the process of classification to make it easy for us to study, to make it easy for us to understand these animals, these organisms. Now, before we start talking about classification, I just said we are talking about classification of living organisms. Let's talk about what are living organisms? How can we define living organisms, right? Okay, let's go ahead. What features will you look at to be able to say that this is a living organism? What do you think, Marwa? Yeah.
Teacher, I just would like.
Hello, Marwa, can you hear me?
7 things which all the living organisms have.
Yes.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Your voice is breaking, but I can hear you.
Okay, now can you hear me? Now it's clear.
It's better, yes.
Yeah, so just saying, I guess there are 7 like the
Mhm.
features which all the living organisms have.
Okay, all right. Do you know what they are?
Nutrition,
Or even if you
reproduction. Teacher,
yes,
no.
fine. Okay, look. Okay, even if you don't know them, Marwa, you can always, we can always have we can always discuss in class, right? You can always give me,
Yeah.
what do you, so just generally, if you think of a living organism, what should a living organism do? What do you think?
Teacher, like all the living organisms reproduce and they all need nutrition
Correct.
and they all have, they grow, like,
Correct.
the growth.
Correct. You can
And then,
definitely go ahead and yeah, you are correct. I'm going to write that down. Or living organisms
what are the other
reproduce. That is correct. What else? What else do living organisms have in common? What is something that all living organisms do?
teacher, of course, is in nutritions.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure of that.
Yeah, nutrition. All living organisms need nutrition, right? Plants need light. Plants need carbon dioxide, plants need water, animals need food, right? Everybody, all living organism needs some kind of food. So they need nutrition. What
Teacher,
else?
and they even respire. Like if like from the
Yes,
plant, they have
exactly.
respiration.
All living organisms respire, right? And when we talk about respiration, so just letting you know that just breathing is not respiration, right? The breathing that you and we do as mammals, that breathing is not just respiration. We also have respiration at the level of a
Which is the
cell.
cells, the
Yes,
chemical
that we
reaction
call
in the
it.
cells.
Yes, exactly. We call it cellular respiration. It's happening in the cell. So all living organisms, even if I have a single cell, they're going to be doing cellular respiration. Respiration can happen with oxygen or without oxygen. With oxygen, it's called aerobic respiration. Without oxygen, we call it anaerobic respiration.
Anaerobic respiration.
Yes. So respiration is going to happen regardless of even if I have one single cell. Correct. Anything else that you can think of?
Yeah, teacher, they the growth, movement,
Yes.
sensitivity, when like
Correct.
when they
Correct.
kind of, you know.
They will all be growing. You're going to observe them growing. Most definitely, you are going to see important thing, and that is excretion. Because
Excretion.
if they are taking in nutrition, if they're eating nutrition, if they're taking in nutrition, then they must be excreting it in the form of a waste product. So we are going to have excretion. Then they have sensitivity. One second.
Teacher, what's the difference between sensitivity and movement?
Yeah, I'll go. I'm going to tell you the definitions. I'll go over all the definitions with you. So sensitivity is the ability to sense a stimuli or to sense a change and make an appropriate response. What do we mean by that? What I mean by that is that if I am sitting somewhere really hot, my body can sense that, oh, we are in a really hot place. We need to respond by sweating so we can make sure that the body temperature does not become too high. That is sensitivity. If a plant, you know how sunflowers always grow towards the sun. So the stimulus is light. The response is that the plant is growing towards the light. If the sun will change direction, the face of the sunflower moves with it. So it's detecting the change, it's noticing the change, and as a result, it is moving along, right? It's giving an appropriate response. During the day, plants do photosynthesis in which they take in carbon dioxide and water and give us glucose and oxygen, right? So what is going to happen? That's during the day. At night time, when the sunlight is gone, they shift. They shift from doing photosynthesis to doing respiration, in which they break down the glucose, right? So
Right.
that's an appropriate response. They were able to sense that the sunlight is now gone, it's getting dark. So they shifted, they went from doing photosynthesis to now performing respiration. So this is sensitivity, the ability to detect a stimulus, the change in any stimulus, and respond appropriately. This is sensitivity. And I'll tell you the proper definitions for all of these terms as well. The last structure is movement, right? The last we have is movement. So what is a movement? Movement is an action by an organism,
or any part of an organism.
yes, or part of an organism to change position or place. Now you would think about it that, oh, how do we then, how do plants also move? Like I gave you the
Yeah,
example of
teacher, I know they
sun.
move towards the sun.
Yes, they
I know
can move
that.
towards the sun. Exactly, they can move towards the sun. So plants can also move. They might not be able to go from one place to another, but they can always change their direction of growth as well. And later on, when we do the topic of coordination in plants, we are going to learn about how plants can actually uh, produce certain chemicals that allow them to grow towards the sun, or that allows the roots to grow downwards to the earth. So they actually can do that as well, right? Then of course we were talking about reproduction. So reproduction is the process that makes more of the same kind of
Same
organism.
kind of organisms.
Right? So your reproduction is going to be when you are making the same kind of organism. You're making more of the same kind of organism. Now, when we talk about reproduction, reproduction can be sexual reproduction or it can be asexual reproduction.
Asexual.
And the good thing is that we are pretty much going to study nearly all of these in their own chapters, right? So we have a whole chapter on reproduction that we have to do in our syllabus. So asexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction involves two parents. So when there are two parents, right, that's going to be sexual reproduction, where we need a female gamete. Gamete is the cell that we need for
Excel.
reproduction. Yes, the egg cell and the sperm cell, right? Or when you talk about, for example, plants. In plants, we don't necessarily have an egg cell and a sperm cell. In plants, we have different cells.
Do we
We
have an
have,
ovary, I guess?
yeah, in plants we have ovules and we have the pollen nucleus, right? The pollen tube, the
Right.
pollen cell. So the cells can be different. So we use the term gametes because gametes are a broad term, right? Gametes can be anything. So we need two parents for it. Asexual reproduction happens with the help of just one parent. We can see asexual reproduction in bacteria, where one bacteria can split into two. We see asexual reproduction in plants as well, where one single plant is able to have an offspring. And that entire topic we're going to cover on when we get to this chapter. Then we have the concept of nutrition. Nutrition is taking in nutrition is taking in of material for energy, growth, and development. So nutrition is when I am taking in materials for energy, growth, and development, right? Plants require nutrition in the form of sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water. If they have sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water, they're able to photosynthesize and they're able to make their own food. They're able to make their own energy. They're able to grow and they're able to develop. We animals need organic compounds, or by organic compounds we mean other living organisms, right? Animals feed on other living organisms. Those living organisms could be plants.
Or
Those
other
living
animals.
organisms, yeah, other animals, exactly. So that's organic material, right? So animals need some kind of organic material that is going to allow them to grow. They need ions, they need water, right? So that is your nutrition. Then of course we have respiration. Respiration is are the chemical reactions that,
The one in the cells.
yeah, they're chemical reactions that happen in cells to break down nutrient molecules to or and release energy for metabolic activity. Right? That is your respiration. All right. Then we have growth. What is growth? Growth
Teacher,
is,
the increase in dry mass.
yes, the increase in size and dry mass by an increase in cell number or the size of the cell or both, right? So an increase, a permanent increase, okay, basically. A permanent increase in the, a permanent increase in the size and dry mass of an organism, either due to increase in number of cells. So it can either happen because your cells are dividing, right? The cells are dividing and the number of cells are increasing, or due to increase in cell size. The number of cells are the same, but the size of the cell is getting bigger, 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 or due to both. Both things can happen at the same time. You can also see an increase in number of cells, and you can also see an increase in the size of the cell, right? Both things can happen simultaneously. Now, I have a question for you. When we talk about your growth, so growth, we just wrote down the definition. Over here, when I talked about your nutrition, so I said nutrition is taking in of material for energy, growth, and development. Do you or can you think of any way in which growth is different than development? Right. Okay, Marwa, I was basically asking you before you got disconnected, that, so I was asking you that over here in the definition of nutrition, it says that we need material for energy, growth, and development. Can you think of a possible difference? What is the difference between growth and development? How is development and growth different from each other?
Teacher, growth is like when you increase in your size, like the mass, and development is like developing. Okay. See,
Okay.
that's confusing actually.
Yeah, okay, no, it's okay, let's go over it. So growth is basically, like you said, you're completely correct. Growth is that you are going to see an increase in the size of the organism and increase in the mass of the organism. Development is the overall changes that occur in the whole organism in terms of the function, in terms of organization, right? Let me give you an example. A way to understand this is that we have, okay, when we are an embryo, right? When we are a fetus, when we are an embryo. So how is it that we have two gametes, one from the father, one from the mother, and when fertilization occurs, the cell we get, right? How is that one cell able to grow and divide and form an organism, a baby that has different kinds of cells? So what happens is that inside the embryo, right, we have a certain kind of cell which is known as stem cell. Stem cells are those cells that can basically
develop.
Yes, they can basically form any type of cell. So if I take a stem cell, I can use it to make any other cell, right? I can use it to make the cells of the liver, the cells of the heart. So stem cells can become anything at all, right? Now, what happens is like this. Those stem cells, if they divide and they increase in number, we will say the cells are growing. But those same cells, if they turn from a stem cell, that stem cell turns into a, for example, a red blood cell, that is development. The organization and the function has changed. So growth is simply the increase in the size and dry mass. Development is change in the actual organization and function. So when it will become a red blood cell, it will start looking like a red blood cell. It will start functioning like a red blood cell. So that is development. The cell developed into a red blood cell. Growth is simply when the cell is growing in number. That's it. So that difference is important. We need to go over the difference between these two. All right, then we have excretion. Excretion is the removal of waste products.
Is it toxic or waste?
Both. Ideally speaking, both. Toxic products as well as waste products are removed from the body. It's removal of waste products, toxic products, and of course, when you're going to talk about it, even and substances that are in excess. So, for example, you drank a lot of water. Now, the water is not technically a waste product and it's not a toxic product. It is just that we have too much of it. The body doesn't need that much water, it will get rid of it, right? If you take too much salt in the body, again, it's not a waste product, it's not a toxic product. We just have eaten too much of it. The body doesn't need to use it, the body doesn't want to use it. We have plenty already, the body will get rid of it, right? So we are removing waste products as well as toxic products, as well as those substances that they're just too much of it, we don't really need it, right? Waste products are produced because of respiration. In the process of respiration, we often produce waste products like carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is a waste product. When I talk about excretion, I don't just talk about your kidneys, right? Sweat is an excretion. When I am breathing out, I am removing carbon dioxide. That is also an example of excretion. So excretion is not the excretion we think of, right? We think of the bladder, we think of the kidneys, right? Excretion is the removal of waste products. So if I'm removing waste products by sweating, if I'm removing water by sweating, I am excreting. If I am breathing out carbon dioxide, I'm removing a waste product. That is technically also an excretion, right? Other waste products that are made due to the chemical reactions in my body, removal of those is excretions, right? Now, then we have sensitivity. Sensitivity is the ability to detect, the ability to detect change in stimuli and respond accordingly. So that is what sensitivity is, that they can detect that, oh, there has been a change in the stimulus around us, whether it is internally or externally. Even internally, what happens if my heartbeat rises, right? My heartbeat increases, my body can sense it. It will send a message to the brain and it will tell the brain the heartbeat has increased. We need to slow it back to normal. So the body will respond. Sensitivity, because my body was able to detect the change and was able to give me the correct response. There is too much glucose in the blood. What is the body going to do? They're going to detect it. And they're going to say, okay, we have too much glucose. We need to bring it back down to normal, right? So internally as well as externally. Internally, it's too hot out, right? I need to bring the temperature down. So externally and internally, both, we are able to detect the change in stimuli and give an appropriate response. So that would be sensitivity. So these are the basic features that you need to know about. These are the features that every living organism is going to have. Any confusion, anything that you would like to ask so far?
No confusion, teacher.
Good. Okay. Now let's go back to what we were talking about, and that was the topic of classification, right? So, like I said, that we need to classify organisms, we need to sort them into some kind of order. So, it is actually easy for us to be able to go ahead and study these organisms. Okay. Now, what is going to happen is this, that we have, think of it like this. We have a huge box. That huge box is called a kingdom. Okay. Inside that huge box, I have a smaller box. That smaller box will be phylum.
Phylum.
Then inside the phylum, I have a smaller box, which is class. Then smaller than class, we have order. Then order, smaller than order, we have family. Even smaller than family, we have genus. And the smallest is species. Now, all of this, phylum, class, order, family, you don't need to remember them if you don't want to. If you can learn them, well and good. If you can't learn them, you don't want to learn them, forget it. Doesn't matter. All you need to know is the kingdom and this, the genus and the species. That's it. It doesn't matter if you don't know those things in the middle. They are not important at your level. So the kingdom, a kingdom, we are going to have a kingdom. For example, animal kingdom, right? In an animal kingdom, we will have multiple phylum, multiple phylum. So we can have chordates or we can have non-chordates. Chordates are those animals that have a backbone. Phylum are those, non-chordates would be those that do not have a backbone. Now, inside a phylum, then I can have multiple classes, right? Like mammals, right? Like I can have reptiles. I can have reptiles. I can have mammals. I can have crustaceans, right? So I can have multiple classes, right? So they all have backbone. Reptiles have a backbone. Chordates, your crustaceans, crabs, and all, they have a backbone. Your mammals have a backbone. They all have a backbone, but now they're in different classes, right? For example, mammals are those that have fur on their body, or
Fur
they
on
have
their body.
their or they have mammary glands, milk producing glands, right? And there are other things as well. So those would be mammals. Then inside each class, we can have order, right? So for example, inside mammals, we can have primates. Okay. Then inside an order, we can have multiple families. So inside primates, we have a family of hominids, and then I will have other families
Genus.
as well. Yes. Then inside a family, we have a genus. So inside hominids, one type of genus is the Homo genus, right? And finally, one genus can have multiple species, right? So the species, for example, is sapiens, right? So this is how we're going to go ahead. This is how we classify our organisms. Now, what is a species? This is really important for us to talk about, because when we talk about species, we have to realize that a species, the smallest natural group of organisms, is known as species. The smallest group of organisms, smallest natural group of organisms is species. A species can be defined as a group of organism that can reproduce to produce fertile offspring. That's really important. Let me tell you, we have taken we have okay, so one type of animal is your mule, right? So a mule is basically, they have taken a horse and they've taken a donkey and they have combined the DNA to make a mule, right? A mule is like a donkey, smaller donkey. So but mule is not a species. Why is mule not a species? Because mule cannot reproduce. They cannot reproduce. So that's why we don't consider mule to be a species. So
Why
even
can't they
though
reproduce?
they can't reproduce, simply, okay, that's a lot of out of your scope. But generally speaking, they cannot reproduce because when we talk about reproduction, so what happens is that inside our body, the DNA, which is genetic material, is in the form of a structure we call chromosome. right?
Right.
So we have chromosomes. So generally speaking, in our body, right, we, for example, have total 46 chromosomes. As a result, yeah, we humans have 46 chromosomes. So what happens that when the gametes are made, right, half of them go to one cell and half of them go to one cell. So when you're going to go ahead and talk about it, so 23 would go into one cell and 23 would go to one cell. So gametes have half the number of chromosomes. What does that mean? That means that if you take an egg cell and you take a sperm cell, so the egg cell has 23 chromosomes, the sperm cell has 23 chromosomes. And when they will fertilize, the original number 46 is restored. So the original number is 46. The gametes are half-half. So that when they combine, we get the total of 46 again, right? The mules are formed because of a combination of your donkey and horse. I don't remember exactly, but I think a horse has around 64 chromosomes and a donkey has 62. So the end result is that the mule gets 63 chromosomes. So we had 46, which was an even number. So we could equally divide it. Give us 23 chromosomes and 23 chromosomes. 63 is an odd number. So you can't equally divide it between the male and the female gamete. So that is why that's the basic reason they're not able to reproduce, because the gametes do not have the correct number of chromosomes. When they divide, they do not get the correct half number of chromosomes. So when they will fuse with each other, the chromosome number does not come back up to 63. So basically, even if fertilization occurs, so the basically okay, uh, even if fertilization, if there is ever fertilization that leads to the production of an organism that has different number of chromosomes or different number of pair of chromosomes, so body tends to automatically remove it because that cell will not survive. So basically, that is why mules cannot reproduce, because they do not have an even number of chromosomes. They have 63 chromosomes, so you cannot equally divide them, right? So that is why. Okay. So mules will not be considered a species. Why? Because they cannot reproduce. So species is a group of organisms that can reproduce and produce fertile offspring, meaning that even their children are fertile, even their children are able to reproduce. So that would be considered a species. Now, when we go ahead and we talk about it, inside a species, right? So we have, those are species, and then closely related species are grouped together to give us a genus. So we have a genus which is considered of closely related species, and then we have species that are group of organisms that can reproduce to give us fertile offspring. Now, how are we going to name species? How do we come up with the naming of species? To
I
name
think
the
with the help of binomial system
yes,
and international
binomial,
figure system. I remember.
exactly, by the help of binomial system. So binomial system is basically what they do is that they take the genus name, they take the species
And
name, and
species
they
name.
yes, genus is Homo, species is sapiens. So the name becomes Homo sapiens, right? And you will see
Right.
in questions like this in your past paper, where they will give you like different kinds of, for example, bees, okay? And they will say, looking at this figure, how can you tell that the bee is closely related to each other? So, for example, you will notice that in their name, the genus is the same. Both of them have the same genus. So you would say they both have the same genus, so they must be closely related to each other, right? Or they will give you
Right.
the genus name and the species name, and then they will ask you what should be the name of the organism. So they give you, that's how they give you questions on the binomial system. Now, when we go ahead and talk about it, okay, we were talking about why we need to classify, right? So let's go over some
Yes.
reasons. One reason is that by classifying organisms, it is possible to identify those most at risk for extinction, right? When I can identify by classifying the organisms, I can identify this species or this genus is at a risk of going extinct. Then I can put into place, or I can start doing some uh, conservation. I can start doing some kind of intervention to try and save those species. But how will I know a species is going extinct if I do not know that these animals are one species? So I need to be able to group them. I need to know that this is one species so that I can look at their numbers and I can tell whether they're going extinct or not. And how can I tell something is a species? By doing classification, right?
Right, teacher.
We also, when we talk about it, yeah, we classification is actually allows us, right? It allows us to understand or study the sources of multiple useful products. For example, drugs, right? A lot of the drugs, a lot of the medicines we're using these days, they come from plants. So the source is plants. So for us to be able to study those plants, to be able to study those medicines, we need the topic, we need classification, we need to be able to classify. Then I already told you it's to allow us to understand the process of evolution, right? Now, when we
Right,
talk about
teacher.
classification, now, okay, you and I are seeing a species. We see two animals. How are you and I going to say, okay, this is from the same species? What are we going to look at? Over the years, scientists have looked at different things. One thing that the scientists have looked at is morphology, which is like how do they look from the outside. So, for example, okay, that bird and this bird have the same beak, so they're one species, right? So they would
Right,
classify based
teacher.
on looks, they would classify based on anatomy. But you and I know perfectly well that just because animals look alike each other, that does not mean that they're the same species. For example,
Teacher,
look at a
now we
cat.
did follow DNA strands, right?
Yes, now we follow DNA. We follow DNA, we try to follow DNA, but we also have other methods as well. So they would go with like morphology, right? So now you and I know, for example, we know that cats and lions are closely related. But if you go on morphology, you would never think that they are related to each other. So then we also go on anatomy. Anatomy is when you actually look at the internal structure. So you look at the structure on the inside of the person. That is when you classify them based on anatomy. You can also classify them based on behavior. We can
Really?
classify, yeah, behavior of the animal. How is the animal behaving? For example, these birds migrate south, right? So that will also
Oh.
help us classify that, oh, all of these birds are showing the same behavior. They're doing the same kind of thing. Whenever it gets cold, they migrate. So that is behavior. We can also classify them based on a mixture. So we can take a look at the way they function. We can take a look at their anatomy. We can take a look at their morphology. We can take a look at all of these things together, and then we can also classify, right? Now, the most accurate method is, of course, DNA, right? We take the DNA, we take our DNA from two organisms and we can simply match them up. If the DNA matches, we know that they belong to the same species. So we, of course, now the most accurate method, the most reliable method is, of course, that we look at the DNA.
DNA?
Exactly. Now, when we talk about our classification, so there are actually multiple classifications that have actually happened over a period of time. Multiple classifications have come out over a period of time, right? Now, when
Right.
we talk about it, okay, this is the classification I like. Okay, this classification basically states that so living organisms can be divided into three possible categories. we have viruses. Viruses are technically
Or
not
not.
living. Yeah, we don't consider them living organisms. They cannot reproduce on their own. They cannot get any nutrition on their own. They basically can't do anything on their own. They need a host cell. They need to infect somebody and then they can do their job. So they're technically non-cellular. Then we have eukaryotes and prokaryotes. What is the difference between eukaryotes and prokaryotes? I will tell you the difference right now, but you will understand this difference a little bit better when we do the topic of cell structure. When we go over the structure of the cell, you will understand this much better. The difference is that prokaryotes do not have any membrane bound organelle. What is an organelle? Organelle is a structure inside the cell. Inside the cell. So any structure inside the cell, we call it an organelle.
Organelle.
Prokaryotes do not have any organelle that has a membrane around it. So if you have any organelle, and I'll give you an example, nucleus. Nucleus has a membrane around it, and we will study the structure of nucleus. It has a membrane around it. So prokaryotes cannot have a nucleus because they cannot have any structure that has a membrane. The only membrane is the cell membrane. That's it. So they don't have inside the cell, no structure will have a membrane around it. So they don't have a true nucleus. They don't have a proper nucleus. Their DNA, their genetic information is just floating around inside the cell. So that is the difference between eukaryotes and prokaryotes. An example of prokaryote is a bacteria. Bacteria is a prokaryote. Now, we come to our eukaryotes, right? When we talk about eukaryotes, okay, so the classification that you are supposed to know is the Whitaker 5-kingdom classification. Whitaker, he was the scientist who came up with it. So he basically.
Do you remember this name?
No, you don't. You just need to know the classification.
Okay.
So Whitaker says that there are 5 kingdoms. He says we have kingdom of prokaryotes, we have kingdom of protophyta, we have I'll tell you what they are. We have a kingdom of fungi or fungus. We have a plant kingdom and we have an animal kingdom, right? Now, when we go ahead and we talk about it, this is a simple classification system, but there's a problem. The problem with this classification is that there are certain organisms that do not fit into this classification. For example, we have, when we go ahead and we talk about it, we have seen that this protoclista, so there's certain organisms, there's certain protoclista that actually have chlorophyll and they actually resemble plants. So the question comes, do we classify them as a plant or do we classify them as a protoclista, right? When you go ahead and talk about it, right? So that's just one example, right? So there is a problem with this particular classification. So after this, we got another classification that involves 3 kingdoms, not 3 kingdoms, we say 3 domains. Okay, we have another type of classification that is 3 domains, and I'm telling you this because you're doing the extended syllabus, so you need to know for the extended syllabus. There is a 3-domain classification. This classification actually divides all living organisms into 3 classes. Archaea, eubacteria, and eukarya. Archaea are those that contain ancient prokaryotic organisms. They are basically ancient prokaryotic organisms which do not have a nucleus surrounded by a membrane. So your prokaryotes are known as archaea. In this classification,
Right.
the prokaryotes are basically known as archaea, right? They have an okay. So archaea, they're not bacteria though. They are prokaryotic. They're like prokaryotes. That means they will not have membrane-bound nucleus, but they are different from bacteria. They have a different evolutionary history, and their biochemistry, their biological process are also different, right? Then we have eubacteria. Eubacteria are also prokaryotic organisms which do not have a nucleus surrounded by a membrane, right? Pretty much the same thing, but they are not. But take away the ancient.
Oh, so really they're not ancient.
They're not ancient. They are the prokaryotic organisms we can find in these days, right? Archaea also prokaryotic organisms, but they are different than bacteria. They're different than the bacteria we know these days, right? They are these really ancient cells. They are ancestor cells, you can say, right? Then we have prokaryotes, and then we have the eukarya. Eukarya are those organisms
Eukarya.
that have a membrane bound. And then I can take my eukarya and then I can classify it into animal kingdom, plant kingdom, fungal kingdom, so on and so forth, right? So this is another possible way of classifying it. We have a two kingdom classification as well, animal kingdom, plant kingdom. We don't use it anymore.
Oh,
Then we have the five kingdoms. I just told you the five kingdoms: animal, plant, fungus, prokaryote, protista. We also have a sixth animal kingdom, by the way. You don't have to remember them, by the way. Animal, plant, fungus, eubacteria, archaebacteria, protista, and then this three domain classification. So
wow.
we can go ahead and do it like so. This guy said that we will make three domains, and then the eukarya can further be classified into the animal kingdom, plant kingdom, fungal kingdom, and so on and so forth.
Oh.
So now let's go ahead and take a look at what we need to know about the process of classification. Okay. So what are the features that we are going to look at, right? What are the features that we are going to take a look at when we are going to say, oh, this is going to be classified in the plant kingdom, or this is going to be classified in the animal kingdom, right? So for the animal kingdom, we have a few requirements. First of all, it should be a multicellular organism. So we can't look, it's a single cell organism is not an animal, right? If an organism is made up of just one cell, it's not an animal. It has to be a multicellular organism. They should have a nucleus, but they should not have any cell wall and they should not have any chloroplast. So it should not have any cell wall and no chloroplast.
Chloroplast.
They should feed on organic substances produced by other organisms. So when the other organisms are making organic substances, the animals feed on them, meaning that if plants are making glucose, we feed on them. If a goat eats the glucose and makes its own energy from that, we are eating the goat. So we eat other organisms, we eat organic substances produced by other organisms. For the plant kingdom, we say that it has to be once again multicellular. It needs to have a nucleus and a cell wall. The cell wall has to be made of cellulose. This is important because other kingdoms also have a cell wall. You will see. I will tell you. Other kingdoms also have a cell wall, but it's made of different materials. So we need to have a cell wall that is made up of cellulose. They have chloroplast as well. They will make their own food by the process of photosynthesis. They will have their own root, they will have stems, they will have leaves, so on and so forth. Then we have the fungi kingdom. Now, what are the features that generally are shared with the fungi kingdom? Again, they must be multicellular, They must have a nucleus. They must have a cell wall, but the cell wall is not made of cellulose. This is exactly why I said that is important. The cell wall in fungus, is made of a material we call chitin or chitin, however you would like to pronounce it. Chitin or chitin. The cell wall of the fungus is made up of a material known as chitin or a material known as chitin. So cell wall is the requirement is not just having a cell wall. It's that the cell wall needs to be made of this particular structure.
Material.
Okay, then along with that, when we are going to go ahead and we're going to talk about it, they do not have a chlorophyll and they feed by either parasitic nutrition or saprophytic nutrition. What is
parasitic or I was asking this.
Yes. A parasitic nutrition is fungi take their nutrition from other organisms. Okay. Parasitic nutrition is when a fungus grows on a living organism and takes the nutrition from that living organism. So if you have a fungal infection, that is parasitic nutrition. You are a living organism, that fungus is growing on your body and taking the nutrition from your body. So it is acting as a parasite. It's acting as a parasite and it is taking nutrition from a living organism. Saprophytic nutrition is when it takes its nutrition by breaking down dead organisms. So when you have a dead animal and on top of that you can see that the fungi is growing, or you have buried a dead animal and in the soil you see the fungus, that is because of because it is breaking down the dead material, the dead plants inside the soil and using the nutrition from the dead plants to grow. So it will have saprophytic or parasitic nutrition. So parasitic nutrition is when you're going to have live cells. It's taking energy from a live cell, right? And saprophytic nutrition is when it is going to be taking its energy from an organism that is already dead. Then, of course, we have the kingdom of Protocista, right? Which brings us the question, what are Protocista? Protocista are not easy to understand. Basically, those organisms that do not fit into any other kingdom, they come under kingdom Protocista, right?
Protocista?
Yes, exactly. We actually have a mixture of organisms. Some organisms will have a nucleus. Some of them will have a chloroplast. Some of them will have cellulose cell walls. Some of them will have, animal-like features. So it's a combination. It's a combination of different characteristics. So we have a cell that is, let's say, unicellular, but it also has chloroplast. I can't call it a plant because a plant is multicellular. I can't call it a plant. It's unicellular, but it also has chloroplast. Where do I put it? You throw it in the kingdom of Protoctista. That's me telling it to you more of an explanation. That's not what you write down. Okay. What are you going to write down in the exam? You're going to say that they're single-celled organisms which have their chromosomes enclosed in a nuclear membrane to form a nucleus. So those single-cell organisms who have a proper nucleus, we call them the Protoctista. That's the way we classifying them at the moment. So if we have a unicellular organism and it has a proper nucleus, we say that this is a Protoctista. Protoctista do not have clear features like all the other kingdoms. Sort of a very haphazard mixture, right? Some of them, for example, have chloroplast and they can do photosynthesis, right? Then we have got some Protoctista like amoeba, right? Amoeba can actually take in and digest solid food like animals, right? Then we have got amoeba, for example, it can move around. It can actually pick up bacteria, it can pick up other organisms and actually eat them. So we have got So basically, it has got a mixture of different features present inside of it, right? So that is your protoctista. So it's a sort of the kingdom in which I put single cell organisms that have different features. So the single cell organism is the main thing, but they have different features. So they can have a nucleus, they may have a cell wall, they may not have a cell wall, they may have chloroplast, they may not have chloroplast. They can, some of them will do photosynthesis, others will, eat other organisms. That's how it is going to be, right?
Did you get the definition for protoctista again? I want to write it down. I forgot.
Protoctista are single-celled organisms which have their chromosomes enclosed in a nuclear membrane to form a nucleus. So they are basically
No,
single,
the one.
single-celled organisms which have their chromosomes closed in a nuclear membrane to form a nucleus. This is basically the correct definition of protoctista, right? And an easy way to understand it is that the protoctista is, the junk drawer, right? In your house, you have a drawer where you don't know where to put this, throw it in the junk drawer. So it is sort of like that. You find lots of mixture of different type of cells inside the protoctista kingdom.
So, teacher, is it useless one or does it help
No,
with
it's
anything?
not useless. It's most definitely not useless because it allows us to study a lot of these organisms, right? For example, amoeba. Amoeba is a protoctista, but amoeba, if it goes in our body, it can actually make you sick, right? We have, when we go ahead and we talk about it, we have got unicellular, we have got protoctista that are able to make their own food, right? We have got prostacista that is able to actually drag its own food. They're able to inside the water, they're able to pull the food towards themselves. So they are not useless cells. They are cells which we don't know where else to put them. When we don't know what kingdom to put them, we usually put them in protoctista. That's more of a joke thing to say. That's not how you actually, that's not the actual science of it. That's more of a joke thing to say. That's when, it doesn't fit in any other kingdom. I can't figure out, is this an animal or is it a plant? Put it in protoctista, that situation. So it's not something you get rid of. It's not useless. They're very useful, right? We want to study all of them. It's just that when I don't want to know where to put an organism, I will put them in kingdom protoctista. That's what it is. Okay, Marwa, we will go ahead and stop over here for today. And then we will continue with our topic in the next class. All right.